Alright, let me ask you something. How would you feel if everything you believed in was a lie? What if the love you thought you had was nothing more than a trap? Meet Uju. A woman who thought she had it all figured out. 38-year-old, independent, successful, and ready for love, real love. She had built a life for herself, one of stability, independence, and security. Yet, there was something missing. The kind of love that made her heart race. The kind of love that would complete her. She wasn't just looking for a man, she was looking for someone to share her dreams with. To walk beside her through the ups and downs. But she never expected that the man who would enter her life would become the very source of her greatest betrayal. And then came Ikem. A handsome widower in his early 40s, carrying the weight of loss with him, yet somehow, still managing to carry a charm that would make anyone feel special. He was a father of two, a man who seemed to have it all, everything Uju was looking for. His smile was enough to make her forget all her doubts. His words, so full of hope and promise, wrapped her in a cocoon of security. He promised her a future. A family. And with him, she felt like she could finally let her guard down. You're the woman I've been waiting for, Uju. I need someone strong, someone who understands. I can't do it alone with the kids. Together, we'll build a future. A real future. Uju smiles, her heart swelling with love as she looks at him. She wanted to believe him. She wanted to trust in his words. After all, he was just like her, searching for meaning in a world that often left her feeling like an outsider. They quickly became inseparable, the beginning of what seemed like a perfect love story. After 2 months of courtship, they got married in the presence of friends and family. The fairy tale seemed perfect at first. A beautiful home in Metoma, Abuja. The house was filled with laughter, children, and dreams. A future that looked bright, endless, and full of promise. For a time, Uju thought that she had finally found the love she deserved. She was ready to embrace this new chapter, to create a family, to become a mother to Ikem's children, and build a life filled with shared joy and happiness. But what she didn't realize was that her dreams were being built on sand. The foundation of everything she thought she knew about love and trust was slowly cracking, and she couldn't hear it yet. As Ikem whispered promises of forever into her ears, he was already laying the groundwork for the biggest betrayal of all. And for Uju, it was already too late to turn back. The road ahead would not be the fairy tale she had imagined. It would be a path fraught with pain, self-discovery, and ultimately, vengeance. The first few weeks of marriage felt like a dream come true. Uju believed that everything she had ever wanted was finally in her grasp. But as time went on, small cracks began to appear, hidden at first beneath the surface, but undeniable once she started to notice them. It wasn't the big moments that stood out. It was the small, quiet shifts. One morning, Uju sat on the couch, a steaming cup of coffee in her hand, looking forward to spending the day with Ikem. But when Ikem walked in, it was as though something had changed. Stepping through the door, his face taut with fatigue. Uju, I'm sorry, I need to go out. There's an urgent meeting. I'll be back later, said Ikem. His voice is distracted, absent. He barely notices the meal she has prepared on the table. Uju, slightly disappointed, trying to hide her frustration. But, we were supposed to spend today together. You promised. Ikem replied with a sigh, rubbing his temple. I know, but this can't wait. The kids need their mother, and I need to finish some work. I'll make it up to you. He turns quickly, heading toward the door. Uju watches him, her hand frozen midair as she puts her coffee cup down. She's not sure whether to be upset or to simply accept it. At first, Uju tried to convince herself that it was just the demands of his work. After all, he had children to care for, and a business to run. But slowly, her doubts grew. Ikem started coming home later and later, always with an excuse: meetings, business calls, deadlines. He was never truly there. The tension between them began to settle in like a thick fog. It wasn't loud, there were no shouting matches, but it was a quiet, oppressive distance. And when Uju tried to address it, she was met with coldness. In the couple's bedroom, early one evening, Ikem sits at the edge of the bed, scrolling through his phone. Uju stands in the doorway, watching him. Uju, hesitant, her voice trembling with frustration. Ikem, what's happening to us? We barely talk anymore. You're never home, and when you are, it's like you're here but not really here. Ikem, without looking up from his phone, his tone dismissive. Uju, I've told you. There's a lot going on. We'll talk later. Right now, I have a lot to focus on. Uju feels the sting of his words. She walks away, her shoulders slumped, feeling the weight of isolation grow. Her hand brushes over a family photo on the nightstand, a small token of the life she once believed in. The children, too, began to sense the distance. Chisholm and Obinna were wary of Uju, and no matter how hard she tried, they kept their distance. Chisholm rarely spoke to her, her eyes always filled with a quiet sadness, while Obinna would sometimes glance nervously at Ikem, as though waiting for him to intervene. Uju tries to sit with Chisholm while she does her homework. She smiles gently, trying to engage her. Uju, softly, trying to break the ice. Chisholm, how was school today? Chisholm looks up briefly, her eyes filled with unease, then quickly looks back down at her homework. Chisholm, murmuring. It was fine. The awkward silence fills the room, and Uju watches as Chisholm shifts uncomfortably. Her attempts to connect are met with an invisible wall. The moment that would change everything came when one evening, after the children had gone to bed, Uju found herself alone in the room they once called a family space. The house was eerily silent. The toys scattered across the floor, the half-finished dinner sitting untouched on the table, everything felt still, like time had stopped. She picked up the scattered pieces, trying to make sense of it all, but nothing felt right anymore. The house was supposed to be a sanctuary, but now, it felt like a prison. She had been trying to convince herself that the issues between her and Ikem were just a phase. That they would work through it. But the cracks in their marriage were growing, and the silence between them spoke louder than any words ever could. While picking up the kids' things, Uju's fingers brushed against something odd, an old leather-bound notebook, wedged beneath a pile of children's drawings and photos of happy moments she didn't quite recognize. The journal, slightly worn and yellowed with age, seemed out of place amidst the chaos. At first, she assumed it was one of the kids' notebooks, but as she picked it up, a chill ran down her spine. The familiar, yet haunting, scent of old paper and ink filled her nostrils, like a warning. Uju opens the journal, her expression now one of curiosity mixed with apprehension. As Uju flipped open the journal, her hands shook slightly, each page she turned seeming to weigh more heavily on her soul. The handwriting inside was neat, deliberate, yet hurried, as if the writer feared the thoughts would slip away before they could be recorded. It didn't take long for her to realize whose journal it was. This wasn't just any notebook. This was Adi's, Ikem's late wife. The woman she had never met, but whose presence seemed to haunt every corner of their house. Her absence was felt in the way the house seemed to hold its breath whenever Ikem walked through the door, as if it too was still waiting for her return. Uju's face, her expression changing from confusion to disbelief as she flips through the journal. Adi's words were raw, unfiltered. She could feel the anguish in the ink, as though the woman was writing just to survive the suffocating isolation in her own home. The first lines leapt off the page. Uju reads the words aloud. I am not a wife. I am a ghost in my own home. I thought he loved me, but all he needed was children and a mother for the children. I feel like I am fading away. Uju's hands shake as she continues reading. He hardly has time for me and we never discuss and laugh like we used to. My husband is now a stranger in his own home. His affection for me has disappeared and he is always traveling on one trip or the other. I have tried several times to rekindle the love we had, but it seems as if his mind and thoughts are with her. My husband thinks I won't find out that the only love of his life is Amoka. Amoka and Ikem were childhood friends and they later turned lovers. Amoka cannot give birth because she had complications from termination of pregnancy she had for Ikem when she was 18 years old. Since she cannot have children, she encouraged Ikem to marry and have kids. Amoka made Ikem what he is today and controls him. All the late nights and trips are with her. Ikem was not bothered when I confronted him. Adis continued, "How can I be the other woman in my marriage? Ikem's affection is only for his first love and I'm lost. He has turned me to a housekeeper and nanny for the kids." In that moment, everything clicked. The life Uju had built, the dreams she had cherished, everything was built on a lie. She wasn't the first. She wasn't the love of his life. She was simply a replacement. Uju stood there, holding the journal, her mind racing. She had no idea how to process what she had just learned. The life she had built, the dreams she had cherished, everything was built on a lie. She wasn't the first. She wasn't the love of his life, she was just a replacement for a woman who had never been allowed to be herself. Uju felt her chest tighten, her breath quickening. The weight of Adis's pain seemed to fill her own lungs, suffocating her. The journal was more than just a confession, it was a cry for help, a final desperate plea that no one had ever listened to. And now, Uju understood, she wasn't just living in a house, she was living in Adis's shadow. A shadow of emotional destruction that had claimed the heart of one woman and was now creeping in on hers. The pages, once a lifeline for Adis, had now become a mirror for Uju, showing her the exact path she was on. She wasn't the first. She wouldn't be the last. Uju closes the journal slowly, her hands shaking as she places it on the table. She stares at it for a long moment, her mind processing the realization that everything she believed in was a lie. And with that, everything changed. Uju wasn't just married to Ikem anymore. She was trapped in a role she never asked for, never wanted. And now, she had to decide, would she continue to live in Adis's shadow, or would she carve out her own path? Uju walks over to a window, staring out at the city of Abuja, the night sky dark and distant. The city lights twinkle in the distance, but inside her, it's all quiet. Uju, whispering to herself. I can't be her. I won't fade away like Adis did. Outside, the wind blows gently, but the weight of the moment hangs in the air, and Uju's face hardens with a newfound determination. Uju knew that the woman who had entered this house, full of hope and dreams, was gone. In her place stood a woman who was reborn, one who would no longer allow herself to be controlled or manipulated. The room feels cold, but she is no longer afraid. Uju clenched her fist as she walked toward the living room where Ikem sits. Uju had to confront him. She couldn't live with this anymore. She had to know the truth. She wasn't going to let him keep treating her like a shadow. She was no longer going to pretend. Ikem sits in the dimly lit living room, his back turned to her. He's reading a document on his tablet, seemingly oblivious to her approaching footsteps. Uju, voice trembling, yet firm. Ikem. Did you ever love me? Or was I just a replacement for Adis? Am I a nanny in this house? Who is Amoka and what is she to you? Ikem doesn't look up immediately, absorbed in his work. He sighs, clearly uninterested in the conversation. His nonchalant attitude only fuels Uju's anger. Ikem, still focused on his tablet, his voice dismissive. Why are you making this dramatic, Uju? You know I adore you and the kids need someone to take care of them. Adis was weak and couldn't handle it, and now it seems you can't either. Uju's eyes widen as the hurt becomes too much to bear. Her body stiffens with rage. Uju, with tears welling up, voice shaking with disbelief. So, that's it. You just needed someone to cook, clean, and care for the kids. That's all I am to you. She steps forward, her hands trembling at her sides as she demands the truth. Ikem, finally looking up, his face hardening. Yeah, and what about it? This isn't about love, Uju. This is about responsibility. I don't know how you get to find out about Amoka, but she does not live here and I spend most of my time in this house. Uju stands frozen, stunned by his words. The air between them feels thick with tension. The words cut deeper than anything she could have imagined. She wasn't his wife. She wasn't even his partner. She was just another caretaker in a long line of women who had come before her. Uju turns away from him, trying to contain her emotions. Her eyes now cold and determined. She swallows hard, forcing back the tears. Uju, whispering to herself, her voice steady but filled with defiance. I'm not her. I won't fade away like Adis did. I won't be erased. The sound of Uju's footsteps echoes in the room as she walks away. Ikem watches her go, a mix of confusion and indifference on his face. Uju knew at that moment that the woman who had walked into this marriage, hopeful and trusting, was gone. The woman who stood before Ikem now was a shadow of the past, ready to rewrite her future, no longer bound by Ikem's lies. The tension between Uju and Ikem didn't go unnoticed. It was the silence, the growing distance, that the children felt most. They had seen it all before, and though they were young, they understood more than their father realized. Chisholm, the older daughter, a girl around 12 years old with a thoughtful yet sad expression. She is sitting hunched over her homework, her eyes occasionally darting toward her brother, Obinna. Obinna, 9 years old, glances nervously over at Chisholm, clearly unsettled. Chisholm, softly, almost whispering. I don't know, Obinna. I think Auntie Uju's going to leave too. She's trying so hard, but it's like Dad's not even paying attention. He doesn't care about her like he did Mom. Obinna, his voice trembling. But she's trying to be nice to us. She talks to me sometimes, like when I forget to do my homework, she reminds me. Why does Dad always look angry at her? Chisholm shifts in her seat, her brow furrowed as she stares at her lap. She shakes her head slightly, her voice full of quiet dread. Chisholm, sadly. I don't think it's about us, Obinna. It's him, it's Dad. He'll treat her the same way he treated Mom. He'll get tired of her. I don't want to see it happen again. I just want her to leave before it gets worse. Obinna shifts uneasily, glancing nervously at the door. He then looks at his sister, his voice barely above a whisper. Obinna, softly. Do you think she'll leave? Just like Mom did. Chisholm's face hardened with a mixture of fear and resentment. She bites her lip, unsure how to answer. The mood is heavy, the air thick with the ghost of their past. Chisholm, quietly, almost bitter. I think she will. He doesn't know how to love anyone, not really. He just needs someone to take care of him and the house, like Mom did. But Uju won't let him do that to her. They both know, deep down, that Uju is likely walking into the same trap that Adis had once fallen into. The children had seen their mother's sorrow, had watched as Ikem's control drained the life out of her. And now, as they watched Uju struggle to connect with them, to care for them, they feared the same fate for her. They knew, without a doubt, that their father would never change. But they also knew that Uju had her own strength, a strength that would either break her or set her free. In their innocent eyes, Uju had become more than just a mother figure. She had become another woman trapped in a cycle she couldn't escape. And whether or not she realized it, she was already fighting a battle that had claimed the soul of their mother, and now, would claim hers if she wasn't careful. On their 6th-month wedding anniversary, Uju made her decision. It was a moment that Uju had known was coming, but had been too afraid to face. The man who had promised her a future, a family, had only ever wanted to fill a void. And now, She was no longer willing to be the woman who stayed silent, who accepted the shadows. No longer willing to be just another replacement in his life. Uju stood at the threshold of the life she had built with Ikem, a life that had promised everything but delivered nothing but lies. There was no tears now, only the steady rhythm of her heart as she made her final decision. She wasn't running. She wasn't fleeing in fear. She was walking away, with her head held high, ready to take control of her destiny. Uju walks through the house, moving past the rooms that once felt like home. Her footsteps firm, yet silent. She doesn't look back. She doesn't need to. Each step echoed in the hollow house, a powerful reminder of the woman she had become. She was no longer the hopeful woman who walked into this marriage, trusting in Ikem's promises. She had become someone new. Someone stronger, more resolute. She had found her power in the quiet moments, in the quiet rage that had been building inside her for far too long. Ikem still lay asleep, unaware of the quiet storm about to sweep through his life. To him, Uju was just another caretaker. Just another role to fill. But what he didn't realize was that the woman who had stepped into his life wasn't someone he could control. Not anymore. Uju grabs the last of her belongings from their bedroom, her handbag and coat. She moves with deliberate calm, each movement sharp, as though she's been planning this for a long time. Her eyes never leave the door in front of her, the door that leads to her new life. Uju wasn't living in anger. She wasn't living in pain. She was living because she had learned something Ikem would never understand. She had learned that she was enough. She was more than enough. And she would no longer let him or anyone make her feel like she wasn't. The door clicked softly as she opened it, but that click was more than just the sound of a door opening, it was the sound of freedom. Uju stepped outside, her face calm but her body language radiating a quiet power. The world outside was still waiting for her. The possibilities were endless. Her life, her real life, was just beginning. As she walked away, the house behind her felt smaller, quieter. Ikem's world, built on lies and manipulation, had no place for the woman Uju had become. She had left that world behind. No longer bound by the chains of false promises, she was walking into a future she would shape on her own terms. Uju had walked out, but she had never been freer. She had taken the first step toward reclaiming herself. And for Ikem, this was only the beginning of the long road of regret, a road that would lead him to face the ghost of his past, the ghost he had never wanted to confront. For Ikem, the ghost would never leave. But for Uju, the future was hers to claim. Meanwhile, Ikem never realized the true weight of his actions until it was too late. The house, which had once been filled with laughter, now felt cold and deserted. The warmth that Uju had once brought into these walls was gone, replaced by the chilling emptiness of betrayal. He stood alone, feeling the weight of the silence pressing in on him. He had never understood the damage he had done. To him, Uju had been another piece of the puzzle, the role to be filled. He had never thought about the emotional toll his actions would take on her. The long nights, the constant emotional neglect, the distance he put between them. It was also routine to him, but it had never occurred to him that Uju would fight back, until now. The sound of footsteps echoes through the quiet house. Ikem slowly walks toward the dining table where the journal lies open, its pages staring back at him like a verdict. As his fingers brushed against the worn pages of the journal, the last page caught his eye. Bold, red ink smeared across the paper, as if the very words themselves were a warning, a curse that would follow him for the rest of his life. Some ghosts haunt to be remembered. Others to be avenged. Ikem's hand trembles as he reads the words aloud, his voice low, almost as if he doesn't believe what he's reading. Ikem, muttering to himself, voice hoarse. Some ghosts haunt to be remembered. Others, to be avenged. The words seemed to be cutting through him, their meaning sinking in slowly. It was then that the realization hit him, like a punch to the gut. Uju wasn't just gone, she had left him with a message. A warning. Ikem had thought he could control everything, that he could manipulate the people around him into the roles he needed them to play. But now, standing in the cold, empty house, he could feel the weight of his mistakes. Uju was no longer the woman he had controlled, she was free, and he was left to face the consequences of his own arrogance. Ikem stood frozen, his eyes wide with the realization that Uju's departure wasn't just about leaving him, it was about reclaiming her own power. Ikem had always thought he could control the narrative. He had always played the role of the dominant figure, the man who called the shots. But now, in the dead silence of the house, he could feel the shift. Uju was the storm that had finally broken through his carefully constructed facade. The house that had once been filled with warmth now felt like a prison, the walls closing in around him. Ikem slowly picks up the journal, his hand shaking. As he holds it, the pages seem to grow heavier with each passing second. Uju's absence was louder than any words she could have spoken. It was a ghost, a presence that haunted him in ways he could never have anticipated. Ikem had lost control. And for the first time, he felt the sting of his own weakness. His eyes darted nervously around the room, as if expecting something, anything, to happen. He can feel the weight of Adi's presence, but now, it's more than just a memory. It's a curse he cannot escape. The house felt alive with echoes of the past. Adi's journal wasn't just a reminder of the woman he had used and discarded. It was a message from Uju, a woman who had become more than a replacement. Ikem now understood that Uju had never been the caretaker he had hoped for. She had been a mirror, reflecting his deepest flaws. Uju had been the ghost that would never leave him, her silence, her absence, the echo of her footsteps would haunt him for the rest of his life. And yet, it wasn't over. Uju's story was far from finished. This wasn't the end. It had only just begun. For Ikem, the real nightmare was just beginning. The consequences of his actions had already started to chase him, and now, he was left to face the truth. There would be no escape from what he had done. It was never going to be easy. But Uju had learned that true strength isn't about how long you stay in a situation, it's about having the courage to walk away when you know it's time. And Uju had done that. She had left behind a life filled with lies and deceit and stepped into a future where she could breathe freely again. The road ahead was hers to walk. Uju had once believed that love meant sacrifice, that happiness could only be found through someone else. But now, she knew better. She didn't need anyone to complete her. She was already complete. She had everything she needed inside her. She had learned that true love starts with loving yourself. Uju had found a love stronger than anything she had ever imagined, the love of self-respect, independence, and freedom. She wasn't just surviving anymore. She was living. Uju's story wasn't about being rescued by someone else. It was about her own rescue, her own rebirth. And this was only the beginning.
Wake up, feel the pulse in the air. Rhythm they call, can you hear it clear? Colors so bright like a carnival. Afro spirit, they magical.
Love and betrayal is deep, yet some wounds heals while others die. Betrayal is deep, yet some wounds heals while others die. Betrayal is deep, yet some wounds heals while others die.